It's still not like it was.
Okay. Where did we leave off? Okay.
Ears are
What do you try to do in your life that your parents instilled in you to do?
To be honest and courteous to others and give of myself.
Now, just since I remember your answer from last time,
What was it?
that was a great answer. But would you also go on about how you stockpile groceries?
Oh yes. my mother always kept the pantry real full of everything, and I do it, and now I find my girls are doing it too. My daughters are doing it too. In other words, we have our own little stores in our house.
And why is it you started doing this? Like, why is it she did it?
She did it because of the Depression. Food was rationed, and she had a big family, and they lived on a farm, and she had to cook a lot, and so she just always wanted to know that she could go to her pantry and pull out enough food to feed a lot of people.
What is one purpose of your life?
To be kind to others and give of myself.
Okay.
Is that enough?
Yeah. Would you like to... I remember you answered this one, too. You said you like to make people laugh.
Oh, yes.
And then you laugh.
I do.
Would you like to reiterate?
Yeah, my main purpose in life is to laugh with people and make them laugh.
And how do you do this?
It's easy. It just comes to me.
Do you have any examples?
Let me think about it.
What comes to you?
Oh, what I got to say, I shouldn't have recorded.
Just say it.
No, I can't think of anything else.
Just say it.
Turn that off.
Okay. I paused it.
To be the Brahma one night, and the waiter was shredding cheese, and I said, "Oh, I love the way you shred that cheese." No, I said, "I love the way you shake that cheese." He wanted to laugh, and he didn't know if he should. And then I said, "Oh, I don't think that came out right." And he said, "No, it didn't." But he said it was funny. He said, "No one's ever told me before that I knew that I was good at shaking my cheese."
Oh my gosh.
Put that in there. Oh.
Well, it's going again. Okay. If you could be cast on a TV show, which one and why?
I love Lucy because I laughed at her shows more than any other on TV, and I could relate to her.
Mm-hmm. And which show would you want to reenact?
I would like to reenact her and Ethel trying to wrap chocolates as they came down the line, and they started eating them to keep up.
That scene has been redone in so many different things.
It has.
It's so funny.
I love that show.
But did they start like stuffing it places? Throwing it. Okay. Oh yeah, here we go. Who are 3 people you truly love?
My 3 children and their children.
She's ready.
Like that. I didn't find anyone. Okay.
I don't care if you ran out of fingers, that's my answer.
Okay, if you could have a blank check to spend at any store, which store would you choose and why?
I think it would be a grocery store because I would love to just pack up the cart as much as I could put in and then give it to people that need it.
Have like a huge dinner for the neighborhood?
I would love to do that.
Would you like to say something about how like your mom did that?
Yeah, my mother, during the Depression, people would come back in our lane. We lived way off the highway, and she would ask them to come in, and she would feed them and then pack them a lunch to take with them. She didn't like to see anybody hungry. And I think I would do that if it was that situation in this day and age.
And why was she able to do that?
Because they raised all their own meat and produce and everything, and all she had to buy was staples. And so she felt like this was her calling in life, was not to let anybody be hungry.
And what are staples?
Flour and sugar and
Okay.
the basics of baking. And
Okay. Do you know why they're called staples?
That was an old-fashioned term. That's what they used to be called.
Oh. If you could live in any time period, which would it be and why?
I think the years my children were born, I loved them when they were babies and growing up, and then they grew up way too fast, and they left me. Now I'm sitting there all by myself.
All by myself. Okay, well, the next question, I guess that'd be more the answer for that, is if you could go back and relive a day in your life, which day would you choose?
That's the hardest question. This is stupid, but I think that the day I was born, instead of coming out crying, I would rather come out laughing.
Do a little ditty.
But the doctor gives you a spank to make sure you're breathing okay.
Yeah, but
So it wasn't,
was
it
boring.
wasn't your fault.
That was boring. Everybody does that.
You want to be a knee-slapping baby, don't you?
Yeah, I wanted to make history the moment I was born.
That might have made the newspaper.
Oh.
Came out and slapped your knee and laughed.
Yeah.
Well, you know that cartoon frog that would sing and dance every time?
Hello,
you
my
looked at?
baby. Hello,
Yeah,
my
but then he'd
darling.
stop every time he looked away. Like, I'm just picturing a baby doing that.
Yeah.
But then, like, as soon as your mom looks at you, you'll stop. You're just gonna drive the doctors crazy. Okay. Now, to go back and ask some, like, follow-up questions. Like, to the one where you talked about, you love to laugh, was that, like, was your family growing up one that were, like, sarcastic like you, or what do you think you
Am I sarcastic?
Well, I don't know if sarcastic's the word, just ornery. Like, was the rest of your family, like, ornery, or did you, like, pick it up on your own?
I'd say that most of my family was humorous, but I think I probably was a little more humorous than most of them.
Is it because you were the baby?
I was a baby, and I like to be the baby.
Can you give some examples of some of them being humorous, like how they would be humorous?
Well, they like to play the boys like to play tricks on their friends, and oh yeah, and my one brother, we had a lady that came home from church with us quite often. She had no family, nobody, and so my mother would invite her often to our dinner table, and and she made Jell-O for dessert a lot. And when especially when company came, and my brother always managed to sit beside her, and because she couldn't lift heavy dishes, and he'd always pass the Jell-O to her and shake it and say, "Do you want some Jell-O?"
And how did she react to that?
And she would just giggle, and she'd say, "Yes." And of course it made everybody tickled, and she didn't mind us laughing at her. At least I don't think she did. She laughed with us. I think she was just so happy to be included in somebody's life.
Would you like to explain a little bit of like how your mother was? How she acted, how she interacted with you or other people?
Well, my mother was a hard one to explain because she was a very hard worker, and she worked in the fields, and and still managed to put a big meal on the table, and so she wasn't always humorous because I think she was too tired to be humorous. But when she was rested and on her own, she was pretty funny, and we enjoyed it when she was rested because she made us laugh.
Do you remember what she'd do to make you laugh?
Oh, she would tell us funny stories about her childhood, and can we repeat what I said yesterday?
Sure.
And she, when she was little, I think she was in first grade, the girl sitting behind her left a fart, and my mother giggled and couldn't stop, and the teacher asked her what was so funny, and she said Phoebe Webster left a little poop, because she thought the other word was such a bad word. And of course the whole class laughed, and even the teacher, I guess, laughed. So she could get by with things just like I do.
Because when you were in school, didn't you try and make people laugh?
Yeah, I loved making the teachers laugh. And my favorite teacher was Mr. Mauer, because every time he called on me, he'd get a smirk on his face before I ever answered. And he would laugh right out loud, usually, at whatever I said. And I wasn't trying to give a funny answer. Really, it was just my humor to never be too serious.
Now, same question that I asked about your mom, but with your dad, like, who was he? Like, how did he act towards other people and towards you?
Well, my dad was loved by everybody, but he was a real quiet man because he couldn't hear. He lost his hearing when he was a baby because his two sisters put him on the hay wagon and went and husked corn with him, and he got caught cold and lost his hearing. But he could be funny too, not always at the same type of humor, but he could say funny things too. And make us laugh. But he was just so lovable. You had to love him.
Do you have any stories to share about him?
Oh, he loved to draw frogs.
Frogs?
And when he was courting my mother, he wrote to her for 5 years before they got married. And he put a frog on the outside of every envelope, and then he'd draw one in the corner of the letter at the bottom. And so that was the first thing I ever learned to draw was frogs. And he would sit down and and draw it for me, and I was just real little sitting on his lap, and he would start off with the legs, and they were always sitting on a log, and then he made up a song for it. There was a frog sat on a log weeping for his daughter.
You remember, right?
His eyes were red, his tears were shed, so he jumped right into the water.
Sing it again. Sing it one more time.
There was a frog sat on a log, weeping for his daughter. His eyes were red, his tears were shed, so he jumped right into the water. He always emphasized his tears were shed.
Yeah, I feel like I might have been with something else. I feel like you told me one time someone would have you, like, when they sang that, they'd be on your lap.
Yeah.
Then...
Oh, yeah. I forgot the funny part about him. He would hold us on his knees, and he'd sing that song, and then when he said, jump right into the water, he'd open his knees and we'd fall to the floor. And he'd do that over and over. And we knew it was coming, but it was always a surprise. And we'd laugh. And so, yeah, that was his humor, was doing things like that. Because he could act them out. I loved him, my daddy. This car's pretty.
Do you have any stories about any of your sisters then? Or like you said something about how your brothers would play tricks on their friends. Like, what would your sisters do?
My sisters. Let's see. Right now I can't think of any funnies. Why don't I go in?
Okay. Oh, hey, there's Danny.
Do you know a funny? Can you remind me of a funny?
Well, you could, I don't know, like, I know Lottie had pancakes. I don't know a lot about Clara. Was there another one?
What I want to say about her, I don't think you want to put on.
Is there anything funny the sisters did? You told me so many
Well,
stories.
were you close
and I'm drawing
with them?
a blank right now.
Were you very close with them?
Well, I'd say I got closer to them when I got older than when I was little because they were so much older than me. My youngest sister was 8 years younger or older than me.
We're gonna see. We're gonna see here first.
Oh. I'll get something in there to tell you. I can't remember what I was talking about, Caitlin.
Something about your sisters. Was it just those two, or am I forgetting one?
Well, Edna was the oldest, and
Edna, okay.
yeah, she was so serious. She was more serious. I don't remember that she laughed a lot.
What about the other two?
Well, Mabel, she was probably my most hilarious sister. She never had children, and she would come to visit me, and we'd play games, and we'd play Scrabble, and she would make words that I knew very well were not in the dictionary, but she would insist they were. And so I started using the dictionary. I had to prove to her that her stories, her words, were not real words. They were made up words. And she spelled them just the way they sounded to her, and they were funny, and we would laugh a lot. And Kathy remembers coming home from school, and we would be sitting there playing games, and we would be playing so hard that we would hardly recognize that she walked in the door. But she said she could hear us laughing when she entered the backyard, if the door was open. And she said she knew we would be sitting there playing Scrabble.
Uh-huh. What about your other sisters then?
Well, Lottie had a restaurant, and she got up very early in the morning to bake pies, and she would bake 30 pies every morning, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon they were gone. Mm-hmm. It was just a small country restaurant, but people would come for miles just to have her pie. Mm-hmm. And so she was pretty special at cooking. Mm-hmm. And she was funny too. But offhand, I can't think of any one incident, but... Uh-huh. I think that's the reason we all got along so good, was that we never got mad about a trick or anything. We just laughed, because that's what it was meant to do, was to make us laugh.
Mm-hmm. Is there Clara still?
Clara?
Was that one of your sisters?
Yeah.
Was there just 4?
No, there was 5 girls, but one died.
Okay.
She burned to death.
How'd that happen?
My mother had to go to the barn to get milk to bring up from the barn to the house for breakfast, and while she was gone, which was only a few minutes, the sister next to her was 2 years younger, and she was cutting up papers. Mm-hmm. So the oldest sister cleaned up all the mess quick before her mommy came back with the milk. And back then they didn't have furnaces. They had one potbelly stoves, and so she put the papers in the potbelly stove, and they caught fire immediately and caught her dress on fire. And by the time my mother come in the back door, she was in flames, and the flames was coming out of her mouth, and my mother couldn't save her. She wrapped her up in her apron and, got the fire out, but it was too late. She was almost 5 years old, and she died, and because of that, my mother never could celebrate Christmas, because her funeral was on Christmas Day. Mm-hmm. And back then, they didn't embalm the bodies, so they couldn't hold them over. When you died, they had the funeral usually the next day. Mm-hmm. And
so it happened on Christmas Eve?
It was in the morning before Christmas Day that she died. And I could understand why she was sad on Christmas, because I think she always suffered guilt. She felt like, she shouldn't have left her. But we didn't understand as children why we never celebrated Christmas. Mm-hmm. But with me being the baby and coming along, much later than the older ones, they felt bad for me at Christmas one year, and they made clothes for old teddy bears and things, and they lined them up on the couch, and I came downstairs, and it was my happiest Christmas ever, because they looked special to me, and they were all mine.
Mm-hmm. That's cute. We can go in now.